Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating, the hidden evolutionary logic driving our everyday social lives. We're going to decode exactly why we form alliances, why we go out of our way to help complete strangers, and, well, why we sometimes feel this intense urge to punish people we barely even know. We're literally breaking down the invisible biological calculations that are constantly running in the background of our minds. It's like a giant puzzle. Let's get right into it.
Okay, to kick things off, listen to this ancient quote from the book of Sirach. It says, "If thou be brought low, he will be against thee. A faithful friend is a strong defense." Now, this was written thousands of years ago, right? But it totally hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures that stark difference between fair-weather companions, the ones who vanish the second you hit a rough patch, and true friends who actually stand by you. But here's the real question. From a purely scientific standpoint, why do true friends even exist at all?
And that brings us to our central evolutionary mystery. If natural selection is this ruthlessly competitive game of survival of the fittest, why on earth do we constantly spend our own precious time, energy, and resources to help people who don't even share our DNA? I mean, helping your own kids, that makes total evolutionary sense. You're passing on your genes. But making sacrifices for a friend? That seems to completely defy the rules of the game.
Biologists actually call this the problem of altruism, because strictly speaking, an altruistic act means you take a fitness loss, and your friend gets the gain. In a purely selfish, survival-driven world, the individuals who just give away their hard-earned resources, well, they should just get out-reproduced by the selfish folks hoarding the whole shebang. So over time, the altruists should literally go extinct. But obviously they haven't. We're still here. So what's the evolutionary workaround?
The answer is something called reciprocal altruism. This happens when both parties benefit over the long haul. It creates a win-win scenario. Picture this. You've got two ancestral hunters, and hunting success is, pretty unpredictable. One week, Hunter A brings down a deer, while Hunter B comes up completely empty. If Hunter A shares his extra meat, he pays a super small cost. Honestly, the meat might just spoil anyway before he can eat it all. But to Hunter B, that meat is literally the difference between life and death. Then, maybe the next week, the roles reverse. By taking turns sharing, neither of them starves. It's a literal lifesaver. But there's a catch. The major vulnerability of reciprocal altruism is brilliantly illustrated by the famous prisoner's dilemma. Here's the deal. While mutual cooperation is a fantastic outcome for both players, there is always this massive, nagging temptation to defect. Think about it. If you cheat your partner, if you take their help but just never bother returning the favor, you get an even bigger personal reward, and you leave them stuck with the sucker's payoff. That constant temptation to defect is a huge, persistent threat to cooperation.
So how in the world did nature solve this problem? Well, years ago, Robert Axelrod ran this famous computer tournament. Experts submitted these incredibly complex strategies to see which one would win in a repeating game of cooperation and defection. And the winner? Astonishingly simple. It's a strategy called tit for tat. It literally has just 3 rules. First, never defect first. Always start out by cooperating. Second, retaliate immediately if the other person cheats. And third, be forgiving. If they realize their mistake and start cooperating again, you go right back to cooperating too. Turns out, this insanely simple strategy is exactly what allows cooperation to naturally evolve.
And what's wild is that this isn't just a human thing. Take vampire bats, for instance. If one of these bats fails to feed for 3 straight days, it dies. End of story. So what do? Well, fed bats will actually regurgitate blood to feed their starving friends. Gross, maybe, but incredibly generous. But here's the kicker. They only do it for bats who have shared with them in the past. Chimpanzees do this too. They form these really strategic, long-term political alliances to overthrow dominant males. So reciprocal altruism, it is deeply, deeply embedded in nature.
Okay, but every system has a weak spot, and here is the absolute villain of our evolutionary story, the cheater. The problem of cheating happens when someone gladly takes a benefit from you, but then conveniently avoids paying the cost of reciprocating later on. If cheaters are just allowed to roam free and do whatever they want, they'll exploit the cooperators until the whole system completely collapses. So for human cooperation to even exist, we actually had to evolve a highly specialized defense mechanism.
Let's actually test your defense mechanisms right now with a famous abstract logic puzzle. It's called the Wasson selection task. Okay, the rule is, if a card has a vowel on one side, it must have an even number on the other. Now imagine you're presented with 4 cards, A, B, 2, and 3. Which ones absolutely must you turn over to prove if the rule is true or false? Take a second. Got your answer? Okay, if you answered anything other than A and 3, don't sweat it. The vast majority of people completely fail this when it's just an abstract puzzle.
But watch what happens when we take that exact same logic problem and reframe it. Imagine you're a bouncer at a bar. The rule is, if a person is drinking alcohol, they have to be 21 or older. You've got 4 people in front of you. Someone drinking a beer, someone drinking a soda, a 25-year-old, and a 16-year-old. Who do you check? The beer drinker and the 16-year-old, right? It's instantly totally obvious. And this is amazing because it proves we didn't evolve to solve abstract math puzzles. Now, our brains are hardwired specifically to catch social cheaters, people trying to take a benefit without paying the rule's cost.
And the cool thing is, our internal radar isn't just scanning for villains. We also evolved to detect true altruists. We're constantly looking for people whose motivation is genuine. You know, those folks who help others without actively trying to get credit for it. When we spot someone helping out without demanding the spotlight, our evolutionary brain just lights up. We instantly recognize them as the absolute best, most trustworthy potential allies we could possibly have for long-term cooperation.
And that builds into this really fascinating concept known as costly signaling. In a famous study, people were asked to volunteer for charity. When their choices were completely anonymous, most people, surprise, surprise, picked the easy tasks. But when they had to make their choice in front of an audience, suddenly everyone wanted to do the hardest, most physically draining charity work. Why? Because enduring a heavy cost publicly serves as an honest, undeniable signal to the rest of the group. It proves you're a highly valuable, resource-rich ally.
Okay, but right here we hit a rather terrifying plot twist in our evolutionary mystery. It's called the banker's paradox. Think about how a bank works. The people who desperately, urgently need loans are precisely the absolute worst credit risks, right? While the people who don't need money at all are fantastic credit risks. Well, our ancestors faced this exact same dilemma, but with their friendships. If someone got severely injured or caught a horrible disease, they desperately needed help, but suddenly they became a terrible evolutionary investment because, well, they might never actually be able to repay the favor. So the really crucial question becomes, how on earth do you survive the banker's paradox? How do you make absolutely sure your friends won't just abandon you if you get sick? Simple. You have to make yourself completely irreplaceable. You survive by cultivating highly unique skills, finding a specific group that desperately needs those exact skills, and frankly, driving off any rivals who try to offer the same thing. Because if you're irreplaceable, your friends suddenly have a massive vested interest in keeping you alive, even if you can't pay them back right away. Which brings us to kind of a wild paradox about our modern world. We all want true friends, right? People who are deeply, truly engaged in our welfare. But here's the thing. True friends are really only proven during deep crises. And because modern living is just so incredibly safe compared to the past, we have laws, police, advanced medicine, we very rarely experience those crazy life or death emergencies that traditionally tested our alliances. So ironically, this incredible safety might actually be a root cause of modern loneliness. We're surrounded by fair-weather friends, but we hardly ever get the opportunity to discover who our true friends actually are.
Now, let's switch gears and explore a slightly different and definitely tricky dynamic: opposite-sex friendships. It turns out there is a pretty glaring difference in how men and women perceive the benefits of these relationships. When surveyed, men tend to view potential sexual access as a highly significant benefit of the friendship. Women, on the other hand, they view that exact same thing as a much, much lower benefit.
And as you can probably guess, these differing perspectives often lead to some pretty severely misaligned expectations. Studies show men experience unreciprocated attraction toward their opposite-sex friends way more frequently. Meanwhile, women report much more often that they have a male friend who's romantically attracted to them, but the feeling is just completely not mutual.
And this massive disconnect? It has very real consequences. A startling 38% of opposite-sex friendships are completely terminated specifically because of this exact issue of unreciprocated sexual attraction. 38%! That is a massive evolutionary friction point, and it constantly destabilizes these specific types of cooperative alliances.
But, hey, don't think same-sex friendships are completely safe from drama either. They actually come with their own hidden cost, the classic frenemy phenomenon. Think about it. Because you and your close same-sex friends probably have similar interests, you're similar age, you have similar backgrounds, you are swimming in the exact same mating pool. And that creates this hidden, bubbling layer of rivalry. You can be close friends, but simultaneously, you might be competing to attract the exact same long-term mates.
All right, zooming out from one-on-one relationships, human beings are incredibly unique because we also form these massive cooperative coalitions. We're talking gangs, political parties, entire nations. But as the group grows, so does a massive threat, the free rider. You know the type. This is the person who gladly shares in the group's rewards. They'll eat the hunted meat, they'll sleep in the shelter you built, but they mysteriously invent an excuse to avoid doing any of the actual dangerous work. And if left completely unchecked, free riders will absolutely destroy a coalition from the inside out.
So to stop our coalitions from collapsing, evolution handed us a really fascinating psychological tool. It's called the punitive sentiment. Basically, it's this deeply ingrained desire to punish group slackers. In fact, studies show we often judge a lazy false friend far more harshly than we judge an actual bitter enemy. And it gets even wilder. Brain scans reveal that when people are allowed to actively punish someone who isn't cooperating, the reward centers of their brains literally light up. We actually experience this sweet biological pleasure when we bring a free rider to justice.
But stepping up and punishing a slacker is risky, right? It takes time and energy. So why do we do it? Well, it turns out that people who take on the risky job of altruistic punishment actually score significantly higher on metrics of being trustworthy, group-focused, and worthy of respect. By taking on the dirty job of policing the group, these altruistic punishers gain massive social status, and that makes them incredibly desirable allies to everyone else. Which perfectly brings us to that legendary quote from John F. Kennedy. When a leader stands up and says, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," they are directly hacking right into our deeply evolved coalitional psychology. They are calling out the free riders, and they are elevating the altruists to unite the entire group. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a hard look at your own social circle. Are you actively cultivating unique skills to make yourself irreplaceable? And perhaps even more importantly, in our incredibly safe, comfortable modern world, who among your contacts is actually a true friend, and who is just along for the ride? Think about that. Keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next explainer.